and welcome back to Get Messy. I'm your host, Maddie, and today I get to sit down with actor, communications coach, and a host of the podcast Mentors on the Mic, Michelle Simone Miller. Michelle and I were in a business program together a few years ago, and I was lucky enough to take one of her storytelling workshops, and I'm also a huge fan of her podcast. In this episode, we talk about the importance of embracing a late coming of age story and how many unique and varied paths to success there are in the entertainment industry, which is something she explores in her podcast. Michelle goes in depth into how she started her podcast and how she overcame her fear of asking high profile guests to join her podcast. And we're talking like Marta Kaufman, the creator of Friends, Tony Goldwyn, who plays Fitz on Scandal, many more, pretty high profile if you ask me. And we also touch on how the podcast gave her more control and confidence while navigating the unpredictable waters of being an actor. We also chat about balancing multiple creative and professional endeavors, the significance of self-compassion, and how Michelle's definition of success has evolved to prioritize happiness, intentionality, and personal growth. Without further ado, please welcome the wonderful Michelle Simone Miller. So, Michelle, thank you so much for coming on. I just gave you a glowing intro that everyone will listen to right before this. But for some people who don't know who you are, can you give us spark notes of who you are, what you do, whatever important snippets you want to kick us off with?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on. This is very exciting. I love your panel of guests, and we've actually shared a couple guests on our podcast. So huge fan. So I am an actress, a New York City native actress with credits in film, TV, commercial, and off-Broadway. I am also a communications coach. So I used a lot of my acting training to develop practical ways of communicating with people in the professional development world and using that acting training to help them with those practical skills. And then the third thing I do is I host my podcast, Mentors on the Mic, and I've done that for a little over 5 years, which is nuts. And so I interview different people in the entertainment industry about their careers, specifically how they started in the entertainment industry and how they moved up to where they are today.
Yes, and we're going to start there first. We're going to start with Mentors on the Mic. I love the podcast. I started listening when you and I are both in The Doers, which is a business membership together. I think you just did a series recently with some different casting directors, and it was so good. Like for even just like 30 or 40 minutes, I'm like, wow, like you're such a great interviewer, and the information that you get people to share with you, I'm like, this is gold. It is absolute gold. So like you said, you just past the 5-year mark, which is huge because there's a statistic out there where so many podcasts don't get to 100 episodes. And so obviously at 5 years, you are well past the 100 episode mark. I used to work at a podcast production company as a project manager. So we heard from so many people how badly they wanted to start a podcast. And for whatever reason, fear, imposter syndrome, not understanding the tech side of it, whatever the roadblock or obstacle, a lot of people never got to even episode 1. And so it takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of like saying, okay, I'm going to do it and start doing this. So how did you get the idea to start the podcast? And what were those early stages like of putting it all together?
Yes, I think, first of all, thank you so much for all of that. In addition, I think because I know how difficult it is to start that first one, I feel like you am very supportive of people and being like, what can I do to help you start your podcast? Because I know it can be so intimidating. And once you start, it can be a little easier. So for me, my story begins in 2020. Right when the pandemic hit, I was thinking to myself, what are things that I've always wanted to do and haven't been able to, or never had the time for specifically? And I had been part of another community called the Create Community in New York, which was out of the Actors Green Room. And I helped those 2 women who started those workshops. It was a series of workshops for actors. I helped them start a podcast. And I had no idea what I was doing for that either. In fact, the other girl that helped me help them, it was like 2 women helping them. She did most of the tech stuff. So I didn't really understand how the tech stuff worked, but I helped them host the first 6 episodes of their podcast, which has been going strong ever since and is doing very well. And I remember going, I wish I could come up with something for me. And I didn't know what that would be. And that was very intimidating. I felt like these 2 women had their own platform already. They had their own following. They had their own community. They had a series of topics that they were able to come up with on a dime as to how they could continue. And I thought to myself, well, I'm just an actor. what would I be able to share? It's not like my credits are vast and people might want to come to me and get my advice on things. And I felt I had a lot of imposter syndrome, a lot of insecurity about it. And I didn't feel like I had a position of authority to have a podcast. Right around that same time, I started working as the Performing Arts Network chair for the university I went to. I went to Brandeis University. We have somewhat of an entertainment alumni community, but not huge. And I started working as the Performing Arts Network chair, and I'd put together an incredible panel of 4 alumni in the entertainment industry. And because of COVID, I made it a virtual panel. And when I was coming up with the topic for that panel, I was talking to a friend of mine who was a Brandeis alum. And I thought to myself, what do I want to talk to these 4 panelists about? And the thing I was most fascinated was, how did they start in the industry? And then how did they get those initial positions? I thought of myself as an actor going, okay, I know how to start. I know how to move up a couple rungs. I was like, but I don't know how to get to where I want to go. And then I thought about all the other things that I'm curious about. I'm curious about all these other positions in the entertainment industry. And I don't know how they got there, right? You could say you're a CEO of a huge company or a huge showrunner, but like there's so many steps and I don't know. And as an actor, I wanted to know. As a person, I'm a curious person. I wanted to know. And then when I did that panel, I thought to myself, well, I could talk to either of these panelists for an hour. Like I had to talk to all 4 of them in 1 hour. And I did a great job, mind you. And was the first of many panels. I'm actually hosting another panel on campus next weekend in Massachusetts for my college. So it's kind of developed in that regard as well. I honed in on that. And that's when I think those first 4 panelists were some of the first few guests on my podcast. I thought to myself, you know what? I could talk to each of these people for an hour. I could base it on the thing that I'm most interested in. What was your first job? What was your first role in the industry? Which is still the same question I ask guests. And then I work my way. I'm like, okay, so the next thing you got, okay, did you start in short films? Did you cast bigger projects right away as an assistant? Like, how do you get there? How did you work in the mailroom? Did you work as a assistant somewhere? Some of my favorite stories are guests who did nothing related to the entertainment industry. And then their mid-30s were like, I'm going to be an intern at a casting office now.
I love a late coming of age story. So I love when people, it's like 30s or 40s or 50s, and it's like plot twist pivot, like we're doing this now. But what I love about everything that you're curious about and the questions you asked in your podcast, it is because I feel like no 2 people have the same blueprint, especially in the entertainment industry. It is, you never read 2 memoirs and be like, wow, like you're both sitcom goddesses, and how you got there, or even like what transpired once you were there, is so different. And I'm so curious because you've had such a plethora of guests come on your show. And like that, one of the things I love is it is different types of creators. I mean, you've had some people like Martha Kaufman, Tony Goldwyn, which I just finished Scandal, like the whole series yesterday. So I'm very much like in Mr. Fitz world right now. Patricia Arquette, mega casting directors. It could take so much courage to start a podcast. It could also take a lot of courage to reach out to people, especially guests of this caliber, to ask them to and invite them to participate and spend their time with you. Did you have any fear in the beginning when you were starting to reach out to some people that I'm sure you look up to and inspire you as an artist? And if you did, how did you overcome that?
Well, first of all, thank you. And yes, there were nerves for sure. I think what it was that, I don't know if you felt this way or other actors maybe listening feel this way, but I feel like I went through so many years where I would go to events, go to film festivals, go to anything networking related, and feel like I didn't have an ask. Because as an actor, you just really want people to put you in their work, or you want them to audition you, or that you want them to connect you with someone, whether it's an agent or a casting director. There's always an ask, and there's never often a give. That's how it felt in my experience. I didn't feel like it was enough that I was giving my amazing talent to whatever your project is, because it has to be so specific. Like they need to have to be looking for something that you to be good for, to then even be considered. So it felt like very uncomfortable for me sometimes going into those events, or even just reaching out to people in the industry and asking for advice or asking for help. And I felt like now that I had a podcast, at least I had an ask that I felt didn't have to do with something acting related. And that felt a little liberating, I will say. So like I would reach out to people who I had reached out to previously, and their response related to acting was, I don't really know an agent right now in New York specifically, or I don't know anyone that I can connect you with, but if I think of anyone, I'll let you know. But then to go back to those same people now and be like, I have this podcast. It's an hour of your time. It's virtual, right? It's remote. We can do this over Zoom. At the time it was Zoom. Now I also use Riverside. But I remember just being like, this is a nice enough ask. And it's just having me talk to them about them. And it still felt like an ask. And then at one point, it felt like I was now offering it to them. So that was something that changed where it was like, I started off as like, oh, these people are doing me a favor coming on. And then at some point, as the podcast grew, as I started getting people pitching me guests for my podcast, but pitching their clients or pitching themselves, all of a sudden I was like, oh, wait, I have a platform now. I have a community. I have people that I can share this with. It felt now that like when I started asking people, it didn't entirely come from this place of like, I'm asking you to do me a favor. It's coming from a, hey, I have something that you might be interested in being on and talking about your project or your work right now. And it still sometimes felt like with Marta Kaufman, who's the showrunner of Friends, co-showrunner of Friends, it felt a little bit like an ask still. I felt like she was doing me a tiny bit of a favor. And so I was a little nervous for that. I had to overcome some nerves there in talking to her. But that being said, it was an incredible conversation. I felt like I got a lot of insight into not only how she got to where she was, which like you said, is so different for, I've interviewed now a few showrunners and they all have these very different paths. But I also got a lot of insight into some of my favorite shows and I love Friends and just to get some of those insights. And so I think that is kind of how I would say it is. In the beginning, I felt like I was overcoming a bit of a fear, but it also felt very relieving in that I could ask them something that didn't feel like it was acting related. I felt like I was asking them something that was more of a comfortable ask for me for some reason.
No, I think that totally makes sense. I think even I don't live in LA anymore, but I did for a very, very long time. And I felt like it was so much easier to meet people. But I know what you mean. Like go to that film festival and be like, I want to introduce myself, but it feels like I'm asking you for something. I don't have something to be reciprocal in return. And then leaving LA, I was like, how am I going to meet anybody? How am I going to keep making friends and like learning from people? And so it's so much easier to be like, hey, I have a podcast. I'd love to chat with you. Than like, can we do a Zoom coffee? Because we're not in the depths of COVID anymore. No one wants to do that. As you were talking, Michelle, I was just kind of thinking about the correlation between kind of what we face as creatives in this industry, where there's like that balance of the craft and our process and like honing our craft, which we do have some control over because we get to dictate how we dedicate ourselves to that. And then on the business side, it's kind of like the wild, wild west. Like the industry changes so fast and so frequently. We get the audition, we do the best we can. Like there's so much out of our control. There's some things we can strategize on and then a lot that we can't. And knowing that you all of a sudden created this thing for yourself, that you were able to more or less control every element of it and started seeing it grow and start seeing it, have that validation that people are listening, they're learning, they want more of it. How did that feel when you started being like, wow, this like thing that I created, yes, you wanted people to listen to it, but I'm sure in the beginning it was for you more than it was for anybody else. And then to really start seeing, okay, wow, people are listening and they're here for it and they're excited for it. What did that feel like?
Well, I mean, it's a very insightful question and something that I think comes from, the fact that you have a podcast, there was a very big difference in putting this project together that really contributed a lot to my self-confidence. I felt like there was so much out of my control as an actor. I'd been acting really since I was 7, but professionally, let's say since college. So it had been almost 10 years. And I felt so out of control in the industry. I felt like no matter what I was doing, everything was so all over the place. And like you said, there's certain things we can control. For example, how much time we put into memorizing lines, our self-tape setup, or if we go to an audition at the time before COVID. So there's so many things we can control, but there's so many things that are out of our control. And when I explain to people the odds of booking a role, let alone getting an audition, it's silly. And so putting together this particular project felt so incredible. And so when I tell people, hey, if you have an idea for a podcast, just do it. It comes from that place of like, it doesn't matter if it's super successful. It doesn't matter if it goes past 100 episodes. It doesn't matter how many years you're doing this. It's such an incredible feeling, especially as an actor, feeling like I have control over this. I can make sure that this episode goes for 20 minutes. I can make sure this episode goes for the full hour. I can decide when it comes out. I can decide what this looks like, what the marketing materials look like, what the clips look like. I have complete control over what I want this project to look and sound like. I have complete control of who comes on. Like I have complete control over what guests I ask to be on or what guests I say yes to. Like there's just something so incredible to my self-confidence and to my sense of self. And then also the confidence that I got from learning these parts of my personality. I mean, we all have things that maybe are unutilized or not worked on as much. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, wait, I love this part of interviewing. And people keep giving me great feedback on that part of interviewing. And all of a sudden I now can say, I feel like I'm a very strong interviewer. I feel like I can be a very great listener. I feel like I can ask questions that maybe other people might not ask. I feel like I can make people feel at ease, right? There are parts of being an interviewer that I know are my strengths. And I know that from developing those talents over time. And some of it's natural, some of it's stuff that I've worked on myself that I've had to work on. Certain things I used to say all the time, like when people would answer a question, I would say something like, I love that. And sometimes I still find myself responding very like rotely, like just like those type of things. And so there are things I had to work on. But that being said, I'm like, oh, great. There's this whole part of my personality that I didn't know as well and that I got to develop, and it felt incredible. So like I just highly recommend if anyone has an idea for a project, just do it, because even if it's not the type of success you want from it, you learn so much for yourself, and that will just inevitably lend itself to every creative aspect of your life or just your overall sense of self.
And what an incredible gift that you're giving yourself, right, Michelle? Like you're talking about all of these, like you said, underutilized talents, or like you're developing new strengths that you can use in so many other aspects, like whether it's your acting or your communications coaching. So that is the gift of it all. Like no matter if anybody listens or it's just your mom, or like what happens, like what's so funny is like someone asked me recently, like, well, at least your mom listens. I'm like, my mom actually, she's so bad with technology. Like I'm still working to like get her.
My mom doesn't listen to, and I think she listened to the first couple and she was like, that's great. Like, love that for you.
After doing it for 5 years, Michelle, and being so entrenched in all aspects of the process and getting to see your growth, what has been one of the biggest takeaways for you in this creative space of producing and hosting the podcast?
I think what comes to mind, maybe it's just because I said it earlier, so that maybe it's not a satisfying answer, but is what I learned about myself, just how naturally curious I am with people, my interviewing skills that later I'm able to develop in other ways. So not only do I moderate more panels, I was telling you that I'm going to my alma mater next weekend to moderate a panel with like some really awesome people, one of whom has been on my podcast actually before. She's an episodic director. But in addition, like I've also been doing more film festivals. So I do red carpets at these film festivals and, going to galas and doing red carpets for those galas. And it just feels really good that I got to take some of the skills that I'm really cultivating with this process and being able to do more things with them. That's very exciting. So that part's been really fun, is being able to go, okay, this is what I'm learning about myself. This is what I'm taking away. And this is what I can do with those skills, and like constantly surprising myself as to what I can do with them.
Because I'm sure when you started, you were like, I did not expect like this to expand in the way that it did. And now that you've also, I mean, you've done so many cool series within your podcast, I think you really do a good job to keep it fresh and just keep it interesting. Where is it going next? Do you have any plans for like what's happening?
I constantly have ideas. I'm sort of in the middle of a little hiatus. So I have a bunch of interviews that I'm starting to, I'm sure you maybe have a similar thing where you're like, there's a point in time where you have to like get a lot of interviews ready to go so that when you start going, you're not like overwhelmed. You don't want to like interview on a Tuesday, edit on a Wednesday, and then schedule it for the following Monday. So, I'm in that period right now. Sometimes I think about different things that I could do. So one series I did the casting director series recently, which was sponsored by Casting Networks, which was a new cool thing that I did. I might join a network. There's a network that I'm connecting with that I might join. So that might be a future possibility. Sometimes I think about exploring books. I've been reading a lot more, and I was talking to someone who's in branding. I also had her on my podcast because she rebranded her podcast. Her podcast was mostly on like related to girl bosses and related to marketing. And she kind of pivoted a little bit because she realized I'd been doing this for so long, probably I think as long as me. And she was saying that like, I'm a different person than I was a few years ago when I started this. So how can this reflect where I am now, but also still target the same people? And so she really rebranded, had a completely new branding. So I took a little bit of that inspiration, and there's a part of me that's like, maybe I'll do more books. I've been reading a lot more the last year and a half. And so what does that look like? Will it be books that I read, or is it books like that are mentorship books, whether that's bios or celebrity memoirs? I did a whole series with someone also who was a doer on the book Atomic Habits, and we did like a 5-episode mini series. So maybe I'll do some more of that. And then I also am thinking, do I want to do more film festivals? And that's been fun. I've done Tribeca 2 years in a row, and I've done Hampton Film Festival. So maybe I'll like look into doing more of those and traveling for those, because those are really great. And I get some awesome people out of that. So yeah, I think that's where I'm heading.
I really like the book idea because I'm a big reader. I love to read. I go through phases right now. I'm in a big memoir autobiography phase, and then I'll go into a self-help phase, a fiction phase. Like I kind of bounce around a little bit. I like that idea a lot. I like it. I think there's so many ways we can have a whole conversation later, but I'm like, I love it. I would be so down. You can bring the authors on. You can do mentorship style. I'd be there. I'll be the first listener. I'm already signed up.
I have an author I'm interviewing next week that's not self-help related, or not like bio related. She's just a nice like romance fiction writer who I love. And I was like, I'm curious about your life. I've actually interviewed another romance author like 3 years ago. So sometimes it's just a matter of following my curiosity. But then once I got her on, I was like, I think I could get more of these authors on. And maybe I do more like book cons in New York.
I see this. I see the vision. I love the vision.
Thanks. Because I think a lot of creative people also want to learn how to write and publish books.
Yes. Because, I feel like it's a part of that creativity, right? Like a creative's a creative. So I think even if it's not the exact medium that we play with, like we have so much, like you said, curiosity or fascination about like the process, how that came to be, what that looks like. And, you mentioned at the top, Michelle, you're an actor, you're a communications coach, you have your podcast, you're going to all these different film festivals and hosting and doing, red carpet interviews and so many different things. How do you balance all of these different facets of your life as a creator? Like, how do you manage that in your daily life, whether it be tasks for all of these different things, scheduling, like what does that look like?
It really varies depending on where I am in the year and how much I've given myself some leeway. A lot of it is like putting myself first, which is a newer concept for me this year, and giving myself a lot of self-compassion as to like, I don't need to do everything perfectly all the time. For example, this sounds very strange, but every time I start a season of my podcast, I always am very consistent with it. And in August, I needed to stop for personal reasons. And I needed that from me. And I still did other things, but I needed to stop. I have some incredible interviews that are just in my computer ready to go. And I think I need to follow up with those people being like including big casting directors where I'm like, it's nothing to do with you. I needed my own personal break. It's coming out soon. I think it's just a lot of self-compassion. Like I was asked to do this really awesome red carpet for a doc 3 or 4 weeks ago. And I wasn't feeling well. I think I was just sick or something. And so I had someone who usually helps me with red carpets. I just had her go. And I've never done that before. But I thought, I've committed to this and I'm not feeling well day of. And so I had her go in my stead. She loved it. I think she's helped me numerous times when I've done red carpets, but she's never led it. But there's some really great interviews. Like I was super jealous myself. I was like, I'm happy for you. But like John Lithgow was on that. Like he's going to be on. And then there was Ken Burns and Lucas Hedges, like some really cool people. So she got to interview them. And I remember thinking, you know what? Michelle, just, have some compassion for yourself. You gave this wonderful person who you love the opportunity to maybe learn this about herself and like learn more about how to do these type of red carpets. So a lot of it's balance, a lot of it's self-compassion. And then a lot of it is like what works for you in terms of organizational stuff. So I think where I am right now, it's like I normally will lead. I'm a Virgo, right? I'm someone who's super analytical, super organization, like into organization. And I usually will give you a bunch of things I do. Like this is my morning routine. This is my routine schedule for my podcast. This is what I try to do on a given week. I started producing another podcast this summer. So that was a new endeavor that also led to, okay, I need to really focus and think about balance. If auditions are coming in and if this is happening and I'm also producing this thing. So it's a lot about self-compassion. It's a lot about priorities. Like what is my priority in this week or this month? Sometimes I give myself creative projects every month and I'll be like, okay, I'm giving myself the whole month to do this task. And so one of it was like, I'm going to revamp my closet/studio. And so I got myself a new rug. I put these sound panelings on. I upgraded my equipment. I hung things up. And now it is a really fun place for me to record and do stuff. But that took a full month, right? Like I gave myself time to do that whether it's ordering the materials, measuring stuff, figuring out what's important to me. So those are ways that I kind of keep that stuff active. But I think right now what I'm really like reminding myself every day is self-compassion, understand that I don't need to be perfect. I don't need to have everything done exactly the same way I always do. And understand that these things are fluid and that, it's all about priorities, and priorities can change, and that's okay too.
The word that kept coming up for me as you were talking, Michelle, is like permission. It's like just giving yourself permission to like be flexible, be compassionate towards yourself. Like, and I think that's, I don't mean to gender it, but I do think something that women, we struggle with that a little bit more. Like I'm going through my own me to me conversation with myself recently of being like, why do you have such crazy high expectations? And because I know things aren't going to be perfect or whatever the case may be. So I think that's such an important part of the process at some point. I know that must have been so challenging for you to be like, I'm sick right now. I can go and struggle through this today, but that's not the best thing for me. And it's really not the best thing for the people who are expecting me to, be a certain version of myself. And this, other person will have this wonderful opportunity. And like, that's so hard because you initially think, if I don't go, I'm going to be letting all these people down. But with the problem solving and that flexibility, it was probably way better. And even like the project, talking about your booth, I think sometimes we want things to just happen so much faster. Like we want that whole project that's like really probably 30 to 50 tasks between, like you said, the measuring and the ordering. And it's like we need that time and spaciousness to be able to let that become what it's meant to be and not feel like, okay, it's my one weekend off. Like,
exactly,
let's go and make it happen. You're like, it's going to be so stressful. So I appreciate that answer because I hear permission, I hear self-compassion, I hear flexibility, I hear
and time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Giving myself more time has been really helpful. I feel like I put a lot of pressure on myself in the last few months. I've been like, you know what? Let me practice not putting that pressure on myself and understanding that things can still be okay. And honestly, things have still been okay. I think part of it is this idea that things don't have to be exactly the way I do it all the time, and things have flexibility to grow and change, and giving myself self-compassion, like you said, and time to do the things I need to do and not feel like I have to do it all in one go or one sitting or one weekend, like you said.
And I think you brought up a thought that I had. I went back to grad school in
Congratulations.
August. Thank you. And it's been a decade since I've been in school, and I love school. So I like, as fellow actor, the organization is nice to be like, it's due on this day. And you're like,
yes,
great. I know for a whole semester what's due when and when my classes are. But to your whole point, there's, I haven't done this in a while, and having some of these different assignments that I'm like, when I read through kind of the rubric and read through like what's the task at hand, I'm like, this is not something you can just sit down and do. This is something that it will take a tremendous amount of time. And like, how do I want this process to look and what this journey to look like? And it's been a really good reminder, like for me, with other things, other creative projects, other, things to kind of reimagine maybe the way that I'm doing things, because I'm like, oh yeah, this one project, it probably took 2 hours every day for 2 weeks. And like, it was so much healthier for me to do it that way. So yeah, I think managing the time and the expectations around the usage of that time is huge.
I think that also reminds me a lot. David Gray was the executive producer of Madam Secretary and has been writing and being part of television shows for a very long time. And I remember he was saying that for the first 10, 15 years before he really got to Hollywood and became a TV writer, he was teaching the process of writing to people. And this one person came to his class as like a student, if you will. And he was like a pretty well-known journalist, like a well-known reporter. David Gray said to him, I don't understand why you're here. Like, you already are an established writer. Like, if you want to go write something, go write it. Like, you know how to do this. And he was like, I'm here actually for the deadlines. He's like, as a creative, I need the deadlines to do my personal creative projects, because at work, I have to turn in an article or something and I need to do it by a certain time. So I can't be overly perfectionist about everything. I need to know that by Monday, this is handed in and it's done. As opposed to my creative work, I can't give myself the time to do it because I have no accountability and I have no deadlines. And so that's what that reminded me of when you said you were in grad school now. I'm like, I don't know what you're in grad school for, but there's something really nice as a creative being like, okay, I have these deadlines. I know that I need to get this done by this time. I need to be able to allot that time every day, 2 hours maybe, in order to get that assignment in. But at least you're getting the assignment in, as opposed to if you weren't in grad school, maybe you wouldn't be doing those things and you wouldn't be able to give yourself that time for yourself.
I Could not agree more with everything you said, Michelle. And yeah, I'm in grad school for clinical mental health counseling, which is super exciting. I'm so passionate about it. I love it. I have a ton of actor friends who've actually gone on to become therapists or become counselors. And I'm like, it makes sense because we're so curious about people and storytelling. And this is just like a version of that.
100%.
And to your point, exactly. I think actually Ashley Pollard, who runs The Doers, which is where we met, she talks a lot about like a reward system, like figure out the way you work best. And for me, that does not work. I need, to me, the accountability piece of like, or if it says it's due this time, I have to do it. Or I have this, one of my friends, we're pretty good accountability partners because like I will be embarrassed if I'm like, okay, it's like even with starting this podcast, I had a lot of resistance and hesitation. And I was like, it's going to come out September 4th. This is last year. And I was like, the fact that I said it, I will be embarrassed if it does not happen that way. We're a reward system. I know Ashley and a lot of people work like that. Of like, after I complete this, I can get a massage. I will be like, F you, I'm getting a massage tonight and eating a steak and having 3 glasses of wine. Like, no. So the accountability piece is, I hear that journalist and that writer so much because, especially for work, he's like, it's going to be done. Even if it's not perfect, like that shit will be turned in. Where from my own stuff, it's so difficult sometimes to structure that process if you don't have a date you're turning it into someone where I'm like, someone's going to be looking at it this day.
And you think about that with like any form of creative pursuits. Like if you think of an artist who's painting a project, unless they need to give it in, it might be really hard for most people to be like, okay, this painting is done. And you just keep working on it forever. Or a song, if you're a songwriter, you're working on the song again and again and again. You're like, let me revisit it 5 years later because it's not 100% right. And you have no reason to turn it in. You have no reason to turn in that book proposal in. You have no reason to, if there's a self-tape, I mean, how many times have we worked on the same self-tape a million times now that we have that ownership? And until that deadline, we might be working on it and working on it and working on it. So deadlines are super important for creatives. And I think often giving yourself that deadline and just think like November 4th, that's when I'm going to put out the first episode, and just sticking to it is the best thing.
And I think also to that point, Michelle, is like, okay, if we say November 4th, now I actually have a set amount of time to be like, okay, from now till November 4th, how do I utilize this time? Like, I know what I have to do. I know the task at hand. How do I utilize this time? So I think that's part of it too, is you actually can see with a lot more clarity the steps and like how to put the steps into that time to make it happen.
Exactly right.
Yes. I could talk to you all day. This is so fun. I knew it was going to be like this. Where I'm like, I haven't seen you in a couple of years. And I'm like, this is just going to be so fun. One of the last times I probably saw you, weirdly enough, was in the storytelling workshop that you hosted. And I got to be there live. So I feel very lucky that I was actually there to participate. And you talk about being a communication coach. And the storytelling workshop obviously was in that part of your communication coaching. How did that come to be? Like, how did you start essentially that other whole arm of your business?
That's an interesting story. That was, gosh, a few years ago, maybe 2017, 2018. I had been acting for a long time. And, you know, acting is so up and down. You could book something and then you might not book anything for a while. And I was like, I need something more consistent. I was trying to just explore my personality. Like, what else do I like doing? What else can I be good at? What else if I was to train for something, what would it be? And there was someone who I knew, who I had met few years prior. Her name is Minna Taylor, and she and I worked together at a studio, at an actor studio in New York. She taught acting and I was a consultant there, a business consultant. And I remember she started her own business, and the business was called Energize Your Voice. And she also was an actor. She also had a master's in voice, and she created this company that taught these professional training workshops. And I was like, I could kick ass in this. Like, I know that if I was just given the right direction and the right help and the right mentoring, hence my podcast, but right mentoring, I would be able to do this too. So I reached out to her and I was like, I don't know if you're hiring. I don't know if you're looking for anyone. Can I just shadow you? I just want to know if I can do this. I think I can. I'm pretty sure I can. But I don't know what that would entail. I don't know what these workshops look like. I don't know what you do. And so she kind of took me in a little bit. And I think the first couple of times it was a lot of like, well, I can't really hire someone right now, because she also was like, I'm running a lot of these. But if I can give you an opportunity, I will. And in the meanwhile, why don't you just shadow what I do and see if you enjoy it? So I would do that for certain workshops. And then she started these 3-week public speaking classes that were in person. And so I started running those. And so she worked with me on the curriculum. I kind of made it my own, but it was really sort of geared to her curriculum and how she does these 3-week public speaking workshops. And so I started doing that. I started going, okay, this is what I'm really good at. This is how I can really connect with people. Those workshops turned into one-on-one clients. And then I started doing bigger workshops. And then at some point to 2020, we did a lot of virtual stuff. And probably at the end of 2020, maybe 2021 is when I started to venture out on my own. And now I have clients. Now I have people that she introduced me to that I still work with. I did a workshop early this year at Condé Nast, which was really fun, helping them with a professional development workshop. And then I have my one-on-one clients. And most of it's virtual, to be honest, at this point. Like I did a workshop earlier today about the impact of storytelling that I did for a client called Better Spaces. And I do something for them every 2 weeks. So I'm going to have another one in 2 weeks on mental agility. So like it depends on the thing, but it's been a really great sort of part of my personality, part of just like how I could use my acting training to help people who are not actors work on skills and professional development skills that like most people need and don't realize that they have a need for, where they're like, I don't really know how to speak in public and I don't really know how to work on that. I'm like, give me a couple sessions. I got you. So that's kind of how that developed. And it's been really fun.
I love that story, Michelle. And I think it's always so fascinating again to see like how things come to be. Like what's like the first little kernel that then kind of expands and explodes into what it becomes. But yeah, I mean, what a unique way to leverage all of these skill sets that you have as an actor and figure out a way to utilize them with so many different types of people or working even for different corporations. Because, you know, even talking to my husband, that could be sometimes the peril of an actor. If you're like, I have all these skill sets that I feel so confident in, but like, how can I make something with them that's not me needing to go work for another company because we need that flexibility with our schedule, but that, you know, I could utilize these skill sets without needing to go get another degree or whatever the case may be. So I think that it's so genius and it's skills. I mean, I think that was a couple years ago, it came out where it's like people are more afraid of public speaking than dying.
Yep.
Like they're more afraid of public speaking than dying. So
Seinfeld has a very funny joke about that, whereas like more people are afraid of doing the eulogy at a funeral than being in the casket.
It's so
like,
funny.
So true.
So, I mean, like to help people, I mean, even in like that work is so impactful, whatever industry they're in, and for their everyday lives to be like, wow, I feel so much more confident in utilizing my voice authentically and being able to do that. So I think that that's genius. I knew that you've been doing that for the last couple of years, but I had no idea what the story was behind that. So I love that. And you mentioned acting being all over the place. It's just like never consistent. And that could be hard. I'm in a season, I work with Amy McNabb as a mindset coach. Now Amy Austin. She actually just changed her last name. So now she's Amy Austin. Yes. I have to keep reminding myself if I shout her out. I'm like, it's Amy Austin, not Amy McNabb anymore. I was in a really delicious season with voiceover and it was sustained. It was like the first time in a long time where it was like 2.5 years working with this one client, and it just ended end of August. Every day gets better, but I had to grieve it. I had to seriously grieve it. Not only the money, but working with people. You get so close to them and you get to actually have like a partnership that feels collaborative. And then you're kind of like not back to the drawing board because I was always auditioning, but like kind of back to the drawing board where you're like, wow, okay, it's funny. I have more resiliency from being in the industry as long as I have, but like part of you is like, it never goes away. Like that feeling where you're like, I kind of feel like a beginner with a lot of experience, but like starting over in a way. And so how do you deal with just like the ebbs and the flows and just the uncertainties that come with the ebbing and flowing?
I think the best way I could answer this is kind of what we've been talking about, which is finding other things that I can make more consistent in my life that I love, that I have more control over, that I can utilize my strengths. I did this workshop once, or a couple times actually, during the pandemic. It was about this book called The Happiness Advantage, and it was all about ways to remain happy. And of course, during COVID, of course, people really wanted this workshop. But I remember one thing that stood out to me was that there was an emphasis that where a lot of people think that they need to work on their weaknesses every day in order for them to grow as a person. And that could be true. That has a certain truth to it. However, in order to remain happy, we need to work on our strengths every day. So it's figuring out what our strengths are and being able to utilize them every day in some capacity. Now, that might mean in your everyday work life, that might mean a personal project, but it's having those consistent things that allow you to go, okay, even on a day when I have a very stressful audition, I have my morning routine, I have the things that I love to do, I have my podcast later in the day, I have this workshop that I'm working on, I have this one-on-one client who I love, who's I've been seeing such great progress with, and then also I have that audition that I'm going to fit in, or I'm going to have that project that I'm working on that will end at some point. So it's having other things that allow you to have habits and allow for consistency and routine so that you're not thrown too much. And allow yourself, like you said, the space to grieve, because that is a grief. That is something, a loss, that it does feel super hard. So that doesn't go away, but it's allowing yourself to have these other things that can still be consistent, even amongst the other things that are inconsistent. I felt like for a long time, I gave myself a lot of things in my life that were all inconsistent, where I was like, okay, not only acting, but then all the other survival type jobs I was doing were all inconsistent. And so then there were times I was really busy with those jobs and other times I wasn't. And I just felt like I needed to add more things to my life that allowed me to feel more consistent and feel like I was utilizing my strengths every day. So those are the two things I would recommend. Yeah.
You know, it's so funny, Michelle. That's such a simple concept. And I feel like I've never heard that before of like, yeah, we are constantly like, how can I improve? How can I keep getting better in this area or that area of our life rather than being like, wait a second, let me stop and think about all the things I'm really, really good at. And how can I deepen those arenas of my life too? So, like, that's such a simple concept, but oh my God, how impactful. Cause yeah, I think, and that's part of it, right? Is even with voiceover, I think I've been doing it 10 years. And this is the first year as I was taking different classes that I told my husband, I was like, I feel confident to be like, I'm good at this. Like, I still have stuff to work on, but I was like, I know what I'm doing. Like, I am good at this. And what a different feeling that was, even how I audition or different things like that. So yeah, I'm going to be like noodling on that one tonight for sure to be thinking about. I think it's natural to sometimes fall into the trap of like, how can I keep improving? And be like, wait a second. And then I was talking to my husband again. We live in a city where we don't know a lot of people. So it's a lot of us chit chatting and us figuring stuff out together. You know, telling him, you know, whenever I feel like creatively restrictive, like when I'm not, I think part of it, like honoring certain strengths, my whole body can feel it where I'm like, whoa, I feel so out of balance because I'm not tapping into creativity, those strengths, other things enough. So that's such a cool concept.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's helped me.
In our last little bit of time together, Michelle, you said you started kind of acting when you were 7, more professionally when you were in college, and you've done all sorts of different things. How has your definition of success changed over time?
So it's funny. I used to ask my guests this all the time. So the first season, maybe part season 2, I would ask people, what's your definition of success? And it was at the end of the interview. And I actually ended up doing these little series that were like, what was your definition of success? And I would only play the definitions. And then at some point, I just stopped asking. And I think I stopped asking because people who were very successful, who I felt like I looked up to, who were CEOs of companies, showrunners of companies, often said their idea of success has changed because in the beginning, they were so focused on money and a house and stability and all that stuff. And then they reached it, right? I was talking to all these people who had reached that level of success, and then they had to change their definition. And so their definition would always change into something to do with being happy. Like they are just hoping to be happy. And I think I had to do my own part to changing, and I'm still working on it. I don't think I'm 100% there. But going, okay, what can I learn from these people, these mentors who've come on my podcast and mostly have said the same thing over and over again? How do I then change my definition of success that has to do with living life and being happy every day? And it's not that you should be happy every day. I don't think that that might be the exact thing I'm trying to get from all of it. But it's, how do you experience joy? How do you find the good things in life? How do you find more gratitude in things? And I think the more people walk around with that strong sense of self and a strong sense of understanding of how they relate to the world and how they live in that world and how they show up for people in that world, I think that feels more successful than anything monetary. Yale does this like happiness course that's free. And I did that during the pandemic as well. And a lot of what the studies show is that people will be like, oh, I want a car and I want this amount of money and I want this job. And then they get it. And it's a very short-lived level of happiness. And so there's this element of that, well, that's not going to contribute to your overall level of happiness. So what does contribute to overall level of happiness? And so that I think has been a more interesting pursuit for me right now in the last few months to a year than any of the other stuff that I thought were barometers of what success is. And that's not to say that things come up for me every once in a while where I'm like, oh gosh, like, oh, that would have been really nice if I had that. Or a friend just booked this incredible thing and I'm so happy for them, but also kind of wish I had that myself. Those things still come up sometimes. But I think the overarching idea for me is what the definition of success is just related more to how do I show up in the world? How do I give myself more self-compassion? How do I find joy? How do I love life? Like, how do I enjoy things with intention? If I'm doing, like, I did a pasta making class a couple weeks ago at Italy in New York. And I just like playing around with the pasta, like the sensory feeling of playing around with the pasta and being like, in this moment, this is joyful. And as opposed to just taking the class, being like, oh, that was fun. And like thinking about it as a past test thing, being intentional, like I'm giving myself this workshop to have a good time with the people that I'm having a good time with. And I'm enjoying the like sensory feeling of it in the moment. And so it feels like I'm enjoying life and enjoying the feeling of being alive more. And that practice to me is more what I relate now to the definition of success. But again, working on it over time, and it hasn't cemented anything.
Yeah, no, but it is. I think it's funny how when you start, I think specifically for an actor, you think you have these the parameters. We all kind of have them. And then as you spend enough time in the industry and as a person on this planet, it's so funny how you're like, okay, I see those still, but wow, has it shifted from what I thought it was going to look like, what I thought I wanted it to look like, and what I want now to feel as I'm walking through life, not all these other things that we think will relate back to how we feel, but it's romanticized, right? It's like the car. It's like, it feels cool for like 2 days. And then you're like, okay, now I have a new car.
Yeah,
totally.
And I'll also add this more so is that I've also spoken with a lot of incredible people who are considered very successful. And then will also, because they're in the entertainment industry, go through a period of lack or go through a period where they're just not working. And then they start to have a weird sense of self where they're like, well, I was very successful. I used to be very sought after. And then like the last few years, since that last major thing I was on, I haven't really been experiencing the same level of success. One of my favorite stories is Jay Francis. He's the VP of Disney Animation. And he was talking about how he got to his role, which is like his dream role. He's so happy to be there. And it's so much fun listening to how much he loves his job. But he was talking about how he first started, how he went everywhere to try to find an animation job. And like it just took so many dropping off of resumes. So he talked about that. He talked about the different businesses he owned. And as we were going through his whole career, and this was why it was meaningful to me personally, because he said, in looking back, I always used to think that these businesses were failures because they don't exist anymore. How could they be successes if they were not around anymore? He goes, but in looking back, I couldn't get to this dream job at Disney if I didn't have those businesses. Those businesses directly connected to what I do now. The skills I learned from them, they matter to what I do now. And I don't think I would have been able to be as prepared for my job had I not had those businesses. So he goes, I guess I can't call them failures anymore. And I felt like that was really meaningful to me, where I look at all these people who have had these periods of lack or these periods of slowness. And it's a fluid thing where most of them, not all of them, but most of them get something else and all of a sudden they're bounced back into this. I mean, if you think of Marta Kaufman, she went from Friends to Grace and Frankie. And I don't think she's really done much else now, but would we consider her unsuccessful? No. Would we consider if she does something huge in the next 3 years? We wouldn't think about the period between Grace and Frankie and whatever that new show is.
Absolutely.
So you kind of have to think of it as that's part of this whole thing. And then how do you work your way through those moments? And so that I like to talk to my guests about too.
For our last couple minutes, Michelle, we'll do some like rapid fire-ish questions. I feel like sometimes we say rapid fire and then sometimes it's like there's beauty in tangent or the pivot. Is there anything that you're afraid of? Like if you're kind of laying there and it's one of those like restless nights and your mind's mulling over something, it could be that. It could be more of like an analytical fear or physical fear, anything that like keeps you up at night.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is not doing all the things that I want to do. There's so many things I'd like to do, and I don't always give myself enough time to do it. I'm worried. Like, for example, I wrote a children's book a while back, and I worked on it for quite a while. And then I was like, okay, do I want to self-publish? Do I want to traditionally publish? And then I work on it for a while, and then I decided it's going to be self-published. And then I changed my mind, and I'm like, I actually really wanted to traditionally publish it. And so then I was like, okay, now if I'm going to traditionally publish it, then I need to go through critique groups. Then I do that. And then it's like, it's a little bit of a stall now where I'm like, okay, did all the critique groups. It's a much better word count. It sounds really good. Now what? The next step really is get it to a place and now send it to agents and stuff. But because there's so many things I want to do, it's hard to go, this is the project, if you will, for this month, or this is the project for the next few months, because there's so many other things I want to do. And so I think that's something I'm working on, is trying to let myself like rest in the fear of like, in that fear that comes up for me of like, am I going to be able to do everything I want to do? Is it too late to do the things that I want to do? Is the stuff that I want to do, is there still relevance to it? Am I able to do those projects and not devote my entire life to that project? I talked to people who are children's book authors and they were like, do you just want to like sink your like foot into this and then leave? Like, they're like, it's so hard to be a children's book author. You need to have like a few children's books under your belt. So like if you meet with an agent, kind of like if you think of an actor, but like, if you meet with an agent, they want to ask for other things you're working on. I'm like, I don't have other things I'm working on. It's just this one children's book I wrote. So do I have to now write another children's book? And like, so those things where, you know, there's a little bit of that self-defeatist mentality and a little bit of that fear of like, can I do all the things I want to do? And I'd like to think I can, but then sometimes, you know, those things come up for me where I'm like, I don't know, can I be a children's book author, but still also be a regular author, but still also be an actor, but still also do all the other things I want to do, and give myself time and not feel like there's like a race to get it all done in a certain period of time.
I feel that so hard. I was there on every part of that journey with you, and I was like, same. What's the messiest thing about you, Michelle?
What is the messiest thing about me? Gosh, there's a couple things that come to mind. I'm not particularly messy, but I do sometimes leave things for a bit. For example, in order to do this podcast, I had a bunch of stuff on my table and I have to like move it to another table. I moved it to my dresser actually, and then I'm going to bring it back and I might need to go through it, but like it takes time for me to go, okay, this is where this is going to live. And so until then, it just becomes like a stack of stuff on my desk, or like on my other table, there's like a stack of stuff that I need to get through. And eventually I get through it and then it's fine. But I'm surprised that that part of my brain still works that way, where like I need to kind of have this be a pile in order for me then to go through it and find its rightful place. So in that way, I find myself to be a little messy, especially since my partner, my husband, is the cleanest, tidiest person ever. So he just like looks at my couple pile, and it's really not that bad, but like a couple piles, and will be like, I just don't get it. Like, can you just put it away? And I'm like, no, I need to be in the right headspace to go through each thing individually and find its own space for it. So that would be the silliest, messiest thing about me.
What are you most excited about right now, personally or professionally?
Well, I think in the immediate future, I'm excited for the Arts Alumni panel that I'm doing next week.
Yes.
I'm interviewing a Broadway actress, an episodic TV director, and a film editor who edit for like a lot of the Pixar films like Toy Story 2 and all that stuff. And I think that'll be a really fun panel where I get to explore like 3 different incredible avenues in the entertainment industry and allow that to connect to an audience, even if like there's some questions I can ask from everybody. And then there's some questions I'm like, okay, I'm going to be very specific with you. And so I have to work on that line of questioning today. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah.
That'll be really fun.
That'll be super fun. And what a cool mix of people on that panel.
Yeah, exactly. I wouldn't say I did it on purpose, but I really wanted it to be very different people who found success in very different avenues to showcase like what can you do with the same education, because they all went to my school in this liberal arts education. So I'm excited about that. That'll be fun. I'll get to go to campus, and my husband has never seen my alma mater, and I'm part of the board of alumni. So I'm like, I'm kind of excited to be like, I get to bring my partner back to this.
Yeah. Awesome. As you're doing a panel, that'll be super fun. And last question, Michelle, and I'm so sad because I've had so much fun with you. I hope that it's not like another 5 years before we see each other again. Where can people come hang out with you? I'll put everything in the show notes, but podcasts, socials, where can they get more of you?
Yeah, so the podcast is available on all platforms, called Mentors on the Mic. And also you can go to mentorsonthemic.com. And if you want to email me related to anything we talked about today, including communication coaching, I can give a discount because if you came from this podcast,
awesome,
for working together. I offer one-on-ones. Sometimes I can offer participation in workshops that I do that are free, but you could email me at michelle@michellesimonemiller.com. And you could also follow me on Instagram at Michelle Simone Miller or at Mentors on the Mic.
Thank you so much, Michelle. This was great.
This was so much fun. Thank you so much for what you do. Thank you so much for your curiosity and making me feel so comfortable.
Oh, yeah.
And for having me on.
Thanks, Michelle. You're the real hero if you've made it this far. Thanks so much for hanging out today, and check out the show notes for any resources or cool info mentioned in today's episode, or places to follow along if you want to hang out some more. I'm rooting for you today and always. Stay messy.